Good day, folks. Pastor Jim Thomas from the Village Chapel here in Nashville, Tennessee with your daily devotion. Once again, I want to read a little portion of The Cross of Christ by John Stott in a minute here. Once again, one of my very favorite Bible commentators. He was a pastor, a theologian, an author of many, many books, and some of them just, really practical theology. Others, like this one in particular, where he explores the cross and all of its brutality and its beauty, the significance of it, the meaning of it. And as he begins to talk about this a little bit in the 4 sections that make up this book, one of the things that he does in the first quarter of the book is talk about the need for the cross. And he talks about sin, a word that you may have heard before. Maybe it's so familiar to you, it just goes in one ear and out the other. But here's what he says earlier on in the book. I'll read this for you, this quote. He says, the essence of sin, in other words, what is it? So, and that's a great question, really. I mean, if I were to ask you what sin is, how would you define it? A lot of us would start to articulate it by saying, giving a list of sins. And there is, certainly some truth to that, some biblical truth to that, but there's also the condition of sin. And I think the condition of sin exists before the acts of sin actually begin to flow from that condition in our hearts. Well, anyway, here's how Stott describes it. He says, the essence of sin is man substituting himself for God, while the essence of salvation is God substituting himself for man. Now remember, this book was published back in the late 1980s, and he's using man in its generic sense. He's referring to humankind, so male, female, doesn't matter. It's all of us who are humans, are sinful human beings. And he says the essence of sin is when we, human beings, try to substitute ourselves for God. That is to take the place of God in the world in which we live or in our own lives. He goes on to say in that very same quote, man asserts himself against God and puts himself where only God deserves to be. God sacrifices himself for man and puts himself where only man deserves to be. And again, this is all leading up to a conversation about the cross. And it's well underway by the time he says this. So this idea of switching places, that we're always trying to become God, and that yet God, to solve that problem, becomes one of us and puts himself where we belong, which is in the place of, we're the ones that deserve the death that Jesus died on the cross. He closes that quote out with this: man claims prerogatives that belong to God alone. God accepts penalties that belong to man alone. That John Stott, man, I'll tell you what, he could say it so beautifully and so well. We jump to about the middle of the book where I'm reading today, and on page 216, he says, no theology is genuinely Christian, which does not arise from and focus on the cross. And so if your religion, if your theology is really just all about us, just all about you, just all about you yourself, me, myself, and I kind of thinking, that's not genuinely Christian theology. And I know in this day and age, people would say, well, how dare you tell me what that is? I should be able to make that up for myself. And that's kind of his point, isn't it? We're wanting to have the last word all the time. And that's the essence of our sin. We want to be the ones that have the final say, the last word, the final word. We're the ones that define everything, including ourselves, including what is right and what is wrong. And that is indeed what is wrong. That's the essence of sin. So glad Jesus has come to do something about that when he came to die on the cross for us. No theology is genuinely Christian, which does not arise from and focus on the cross. A couple pages later, I really like this. As he's talking about this, he talks about Jesus' perspective on the cross himself, like what did he think about it? He talks about what is revealed in the cross, what is revealed about God, for instance, in the cross. Why would God do this? Do we need God to do this? Does God accomplish something on the cross? And he's so brilliant about this. Let me just read from page 220 a little bit. The question we desire to press is this: just how does the cross display and demonstrate Christ's love? Now, there's a lot of people out in the world in which we live today would just think, that the only characteristic of God is love. And the Bible does say God is love. What the Bible does not say is that love is God. In other words, you can't just interswap those two words. He's not just a warm, fuzzy feeling. And I think the reason we can't do that is because we have a very trivial view of love, and we also probably, most of us, have a trivial view of God. Our God is too small, and our understanding of love is too shallow. And so he is saying here, how is it that the cross displays and demonstrates, not only puts it up to be seen, displays it, but demonstrates Christ's love for us? Let me just read the rest of this paragraph. I think you'll like this. What is there in the cross which reveals love? True love is purposive in its self-giving. It does not make random or reckless gestures. If you were to jump off the end of a pier and drown, or dash into a burning building and be burnt to death, and if your self-sacrifice had no saving purpose, you would convince me of your folly, not of your love. Now, see, again, this is just honest thinking. It's reasonable thinking. It's a rational faith in that regard. You would convince me of your folly, not your love. He goes on, but if I were myself drowning in the sea or trapped in the burning building, and it was in attempting to rescue me that you lost your life, then I would indeed see love, not folly, in your action. You see how that starts to change it all around? It gives the kind of depth and meaning that we're supposed to see in this self-sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. Just so, the death of Jesus on the cross cannot be seen as a demonstration of love in itself, but only if he gave his life in order to rescue ours. His death must be seen to have had an objective before it can have an appeal. See, if it were just another good man down, another tragic hero fallen, that would hold no promise, no hope for you or for me at all. And sad, yeah, but folly is the way he says it here. And I think he's right. It would just be another reckless folly. But here, the idea is that Christ has actually accomplished something and demonstrated something as well. This is beautiful. Paul, the apostle, and John, the apostle, saw love in the cross because they understood it respectively as a death for sinners, okay, Romans 5:8, and as a propitiation for sins. That is, he literally took God's wrath in our place. That is to say, the cross can be seen as a proof of God's love only when it is at the same time seen as a proof of his justice. Hence, the need to keep these two demonstrations together in our minds. I love this. In the cross of Christ, God's justice and love are simultaneously revealed, so that we can speak of his love only in connection with the reality of the cross. That's a quote from Berkouwer. Again, God's graciousness and justice are revealed only in the real substitution, in the radical sacrifice, in the reversing of roles. Similarly, the Apostle Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 5:14 and 15, Christ's love compels us. Literally, it grips us, okay? And so leaves us no choice, because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. Just a little bit more. Stott continues, the cross is the supreme revelation in history of the love of God. How about that? He loves you that much that he would do that. Do you really know that? Do you understand that? Can you walk in that freedom today of his love for you? Wow. He says, but the revelation consists essentially in a redemption rather than the redemption in a revelation. See, this is so amazing, right? So and I got to read that part again because it's so cool. The cross is the supreme revelation in history of the love of God. But the revelation consists essentially in a redemption rather than the redemption in a revelation. God already loved you while you were yet a sinner. He loved me while I was yet a sinner. And this is one of the beauties of the majesty of the cross, of the justice, the mercy, the love, the compassion, all of that. And so at the end of this very chapter on page 226, this is how I want to close out. Just this quote that I've used in sermons before. You might be familiar with it, but don't just grow indifferent to this. Listen to this. When we look at the cross, we see the justice, love, wisdom, and power of God. Let me say those four things again. Think of a vertical beam and a horizontal beam, okay? So headed in four directions, right? When we look at the cross, we see the justice, love, wisdom, and power of God. He goes on to say, and this is brilliant, it is not easy to decide which is the most luminously revealed, whether the justice of God in judging sin or the love of God in bearing the judgment in our place, or the wisdom of God in perfectly combining the two, or fourthly, the power of God in saving those who believe. For the cross is equally an act and therefore a demonstration of God's justice, love, wisdom, and power. The cross assures us that this God, the God of the Bible, the God who came in the person and work of Jesus Christ, this God is the reality within, behind, and beyond the universe. Oh, man. The Cross of Christ by John Stott. If you don't have it and you'd like to read more, that's a great book to get, and I highly recommend it to you. Let me pray. Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for the cross. As we're wearing one, or we've got one tattooed on our body, or we see one on a building today or on someone else, I pray that it reminds us not just of jewelry, but, Lord, of your love, your justice, your wisdom, and your power. Oh, may we walk in the light of the beautiful complexity of all of that, and that you did all of that because of your great love for us. We give you thanks. Amen and amen. God bless you.
Daily Devotions with Pastor Jim Thomas is a resource of the Village Chapel in Nashville, Tennessee. If you find this daily devotional beneficial, leave a review and share it with friends and family. For more resources or to support our ministry, visit our website, thevillagechapel.com. Artwork for this podcast by Kim Thomas. Music by Phil Kagi.